Welcome back to Grand Ballroom B for Session 11, Strategies for Utilizing AI Technology in CSOs to Achieve the SDGs. AI is transforming how civil society organizations operate, offering unprecedented opportunities to enhance efficiency, transparency, and impact in global development efforts. This session is hosted by the Korea NGO Council for Overseas Development Cooperation and will explore how AI-driven solutions can be harnessed to advance the SDGs in the nonprofit sector. We are delighted to introduce Dae-sik Cho, Secretary General of KCOC, who will lead a discussion on leveraging emerging technologies for data-driven decision-making, humanitarian aid, and global advocacy. We are also honored to have a panel of esteemed guests: Jun Oh, Board Chair of Save the Children Korea, Jung-Gung Kim, Secretary General of Good Neighbors International, and Chang-Nam Choi, President of Korea Food for the Hungry International. Let us all extend a heartfelt welcome to our moderator and panelists.
Good morning. Welcome to this session. The topic for this session is strategizing the utilization of AI technology in CSOs to achieve the SDGs. We will stay on this topic but expand it a little further. AI is at the center of this discussion, but it's also a part of digital transformation, and so we will be discussing how AI and digital transformation is impacting the activities of CSOs. And we will also take a look at the impact on the achievement of SDGs. What are some of the challenges and limitations as well? So we will try to expand on this given topic. Let us proceed in the following way. We will discuss within the panel for about 40 days, but then we will open the dialogue to our audience for the last 20 minutes of this session. We have invited 3 people for the panel, and we will ask them to introduce themselves.
Yes, good morning. I am Choi Chang-nam, the president of Korea Food for the Hungry International. Thank you for inviting me. We will be talking about how we can use digital technology for solving issues related to SDG, and I do hope that we can find some clues into solving these challenges. Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you. I am Oh Jun, the board chair of Save the Children Korea. And I have been participating in this session related to the CSO, and it is a pleasure to be here once again at GEEF 2025.
Pleased to meet you. I am Kim Jong-kwon, Secretary General of Good Neighbors International. I look forward to a great discussion today. Thank you.
So we have 3 panelists. Once again, a big round of applause for our excellent panelists here today. So I am the moderator, and let me briefly introduce myself. I am the Secretary General of KCOC, and the KCOC provides humanitarian support. There's about 140 NGOs in Korea that provide such humanitarian aid, and we provide support to these NGOs in Korea. So we have invited these representative organizations and also the leaders of these groups that have expertise. So KCOC represents 140 organizations, and our members also support these groups so that we can carry out activities across the globe. We have 3 main questions for today. So humanitarian aid and also international development. In these areas, I think that there are 2 waves that are approaching us. And number 1, the first wave would be the launch of the second Trump administration. We are hearing from the United States there's great changes, revolutionary changes taking place. And number two, with generative AI, we can see that digital transformation is taking place. It has been taking place for the past 3 to 4 years, but at the same time, I think that we are at a point of inflection. So we will be discussing these two big waves of change. So the first, I prepared 3 questions, but first of all, let me explain further. So the first question is related to AI and digital transformation. So for the NGOs and CSOs, what kind of impact will the digital transformation in AI have on the NGOs and CSOs? And number 2, then AI and digital transformation. Well, our fundamental goal is to achieve our SDGs. So how will AI and digital transformation help achieve the SDGs? What will be the benefits of achieving the SDGs when utilizing and implementing AI and digital transformation? And what will be some of the drawbacks? And number 3, from a collective standpoint or from an individual standpoint, well, what is a perspective towards AI and digital transformation that the CSOs might have? And what are some of the use cases of AI and digital transformation that we can find in the CSO? So let's start with the first question. AI and digital transformation. In terms of international development and humanitarian aid, well, what kind of impact is AI and digital transformation having on CSOs? First, I would like to invite President 주최하는 to answer this question. The reason that I am asking and inviting President Choi to answer first is because he used to be an IT expert. He had led an IT corporation, so that is why I am asking him to respond first. Yes, well, as it was just mentioned, digital transformation has been taking place for quite some time. And for sustainable growth of companies, we have been talking about digital transformation. But with AI, I think that we are no longer saying digital transformation, but now we have taken a step further and we are talking about AI transformation. When I look at the word transformation, well, for the growth strategy, companies talk about transformation. But the reason that the NGOs look for transformation, well, they seek for material support, but at the same time, well, we have to take a look at the mindset transformation. So when the supporters support these NGOs and CSOs, I think that transformation is also important in the sense of mindset transformation. And so we have to think about how the digital technology can help bring about a transformation of mindsets as well. So we talk about digital technologies and AI, and at a time, I think that AI actually utilizes data, and through data training or training based on data, AI technology is further advanced. And we can see that in our organization as well, we have been carrying out activities for the past 36 years. And if we look at the various fields, well, it includes the areas that is linked with SDGs. There are various activities, and we have various data linked with these activities, but these data are fragmented. These are data related to the field. These are data related to the activists. However, the data is fragmented and we have not been utilizing this data effectively. So if we do utilize this data and link it with AI, then first of all, if we want to do that, we have to think about how we can effectively use the data, how we can take the fragmented data, and how can we effectively use this? Not only the data of these 4 organizations, but how can we collect the data that is fragmented throughout the CSO arena? And how can we take a better and effective use of such data because, as you know, the NGOs, we do not have a lot of resources. So we have to find a better way to effectively utilize what we have. And also, for example, we have the challenges related to the aging population, the environmental challenges. There are many disasters ongoing. So we have to think about how we can effectively utilize the data to solve these challenges, and how we can collect the fragmented data, and how we can use the fragmented data to train AI so that we can utilize it for more effective decision-making in this area, in our field, and use it for changing our actions and mindset. Thank you. So, we've just heard President Choi speak, and he mentioned a keyword of the fragmentation of data, and ODA fragmentation came to mind as well. So at the same time, if we think about a different layer, we can think about the massive data that has been accumulated over the past 36 years. But how are we going to resolve this issue of fragmentation? I think that is a big challenge that we must solve in this era of AI. Oh-jun, Chairman Oh-jun, please go ahead. Yes, so the NGOs or the CSOs, from their perspectives, well, AI and digital transformation, what kind of changes can we expect? Well, I think that we can mention two. First of all, the NGOs, especially the large NGOs that are represented here today. Well, these NGOs are operated like corporations or companies, and so we can utilize AI or data, digital technology, to make our operations work more effectively. For example, marketing, or for example, the various activities that we carry out, fundraising, for example, we can utilize big data, approaching data. We can utilize that data in the work that we do. But among the NGOs, well, actually, there are a lot of NGOs. Actually, the majority of the NGOs do not have the size or the scale to be able to do that. So the NGOs, whether they're mostly the large size NGOs, well, these NGOs will be more affected, I think, by this trend. But what is more important is that the vulnerable in our society, the socially weak, we have to think about what kind of impact does digital transformation have on them. I think that's most important for the NGOs, because when we carry out our activities, we receive the support from our supporters. And I think that it's nothing to brag about that we're utilizing AI to carry out the activities that we do, receiving the support from our supporters, because our reason for existence is to provide support, to help the vulnerable in our society. So we really have to think about the impact that digital transformation has on the vulnerable in our society. Even before AI, we talked about the digital divide. We talked about the fourth industrial revolution, and even before that, during the third industrial revolution, when there was introduction of the internet in the developing countries, and also in the vulnerable groups of society, when there was the introduction of broadband and advanced technology, we saw those who were not benefiting from these new technology. And there was a digital divide in our society that was increasing. So we have to think about how the digital divide can help these people. What are the benefits that can be provided to these people? We play a supplementary role to the government. So these are the issues that we have to think about. Let me give you an example. In 1962, Korea first started broadcasting services, and that was done by KBS. But in order to watch television, broadcasting services, you need to have a television set. And so when there was a launch of the television services in 1962, what happened was, in 1963, there was a survey, and it was found that there was only 1% of the total population that had a television in their homes. But then in the 1990s, we could see that the penetration rate of televisions throughout the country was 120%, meaning that there were households that had more than one televisions in Korea. So you can see that throughout the years, there had been development that had taken place in our society. So the companies say that we've been developing. There are households that have more than one televisions in their homes. And you can say that this is a positive development, positive trend. But from an NGO perspective, well, in 1963, only 1% of the population could watch television. But the remaining 99% who could not watch television, how could the 99% also receive benefits within a short period of time? That's what we had to think about. And that, solving that issue, actually is a role of NGOs. So we have to think about that and have that in mind as we think about digital transformation. There's a lot of robot vacuum cleaners nowadays. And as you know, they're very pricey, over 1 million Korean won. Among the people who need such robo vacuum cleaners, there are the people with disabilities. Those are the people who really need these devices. But actually, because these devices are so pricey, do you think that it's mainly the people with disabilities who utilize these gadgets? No. The people who need such gadgets the most are not being able to benefit them. So it's the role of the government and social welfare to ensure that these people receive these benefits, and also the NGOs have to play that role. Yes, we've just heard from Chairman Oh emphasize a very important point. Digital divide, this key word, it's been around for the past 2 decades, but how are we going to overcome the digital divide? We're still thinking about this. We talk about generative AI these days, and we can see that rapid change, the pace of change is accelerating. And you talked about the size of NGOs. There are more larger NGOs, there are smaller NGOs, and there's a gap in the size of NGOs as well. But it's not just about size. In all fields, we can see that there is a massive gap and a massive divide. And what you mentioned, the last part, really captured my attention, because the digital divide, there is a widening divide in all areas. And we really have to think about the divide. Only the NGOs and the non-profits, I think, can be genuine in thinking and sincere in thinking about how we can solve the issue of divide in our society. So we have to show leadership in solving this issue of divide in our society. And the NGOs have to take the lead in solving the social challenge of divide. So thank you very much for raising that issue.
총장님.
Let us now go to Secretary General Kim. So digital transformation based on AI and its impact on NGOs. It does develop NGOs further, but it also does present limitations. NGOs have always been at the site of development to work with the local community. By creating a common understanding about development and communicating with the local community, we have always worked to develop based on partnership with the local communities. That is the development paradigm that we have developed. But now we need to take that a step further. How are we going to leverage AI technologies to enhance the productivity and efficiency of our societies? That is the current task at hand. And I believe that we can work with these issues along with digital transformation. I would like to take this opportunity to talk about 2 aspects, the first of which is when we utilize AI technologies within the NGOs, as President Choi has mentioned, how are we going to accumulate data and utilize data? And at the same time, how are we going to deal with the difference to the access to technology? Concerning the first point, for development NGOs, from the management side, from the business plan side, we have great information that we have accumulated thus far. But how are we going to combine the accumulated information to make our management more efficient and productive? From the management perspective, I welcome the utilization of technology. During the last 18 months or so, we have collected all of the fragmented pieces of information related to management. And thanks to the last 18 months of work, we have been able to apply AI to much of the office work that we conduct. This frees our office workers from repetitive roles and tasks so that they can move on and concentrate on more strategic and productive work. So from the management perspective, such a change is indeed a very efficient and effective change. From the business side, if we apply these technologies on site, there are various solutions that we can provide. So from the project perspective, whether it be the internet infrastructure of the developing countries, we have to think about their local situation. For our projects, we have a 7-to-3 ratio between the urban and rural areas. Developing countries tend to experience a larger gap in the income, and so 70% of our projects are in rural areas. And therefore, these rural areas are where we usually conduct our projects, but due to their internet infrastructure, there is issues with access to AI. As Chair Oh has mentioned, for larger NGOs like ourselves, we are quickly introducing AI to the work that we do, and we have made great advancements in the work that we do and the talent that we foster. But what about the smaller NGOs? Would they be able to make an investment to catch up with these trends? For our employees, they can use ChatGPT, and I think using ChatGPT has already become very universal. But if we take a deep dive into the work that NGOs do, there is a wide variety of work that NGOs do. And so, what are some of the solutions that can cover the full range of activities conducted by NGOs? This would incur cost on customization and also talent. Would the smaller NGOs be able to afford this? And so in order to foster the CSOs, then I do believe that the government should refer to the experience of the larger NGOs so that they can enable the smaller NGOs to utilize the experience of the larger NGOs through budgetary support. And I also look forward to KCOC advocating the need to the government. Thank you very much. Well, having listened to Secretary General Kim, the one word that remains in my head is productivity. Well, as you're well aware, in the US, Elon Musk is applying his private sector experience into Doge, and that is driving the rise of productivity. And so, productivity and efficiency increases are being experienced at NGOs through AI, as have been mentioned by Secretary General Kim. And so, having listened to the first round of answers, I can see what a great panel that we have put together. They have great expertise in this area, and they have been able to share with us some deep dives into these issues. Before we go on to the second question, I would like to remind you that we will have a Q&A session at the end of all three questions, but if there are any urgent questions, I would like to accept that question, but Professor Song In-an is here, and maybe we can ask two people to ask questions concerning this topic. Yes, the person who raised their hand. Yes, you can go first.
Well, first, I think that there's a lot of administrative challenges when it comes to investment management. And so I think that there can be a number of strategies for that. First of all, actually there can be four. And first of all, I think there is the issue of agency, because the ownership or the management, there can be a clash of interests. And so the decision-making related to investment, those can be some issues that may arise. So I think that the management's interests should be aligned with the interests of the shareholders. And also there has to be an independent board of directors created. And also the investors and the companies should have transparent information sharing and regular information sharing communication. And also the complexity can be an issue, because there's a lot of regulations and legal requirements for investment. And so to solve this, there has to be continuous education and training and receiving the expert consulting services. AI, as it was mentioned before, has been penetrating into our daily lives. I think starting from around 2010, it has been entering into the daily lives, but it's a function that not a lot of the general public has been aware of. So can you make this concise? Yes. So how can AI be better known to the people and NGO? Can there be any policies? Let's take another question.
Yes, a microphone towards the front, please. Thank you very much. I have two short questions. The first question is about the fragmentation of data, which you already mentioned in your dialogue. I can really relate to that, but solving this issue, do you believe that it should be led by the government ideally, or should it be led by the private sector or the NGO? My second question is, for the larger NGOs and the smaller NGOs, how do they feel about sharing the data? To put it more frankly, are the NGOs willing to share the data for free, or do you believe that the NGOs would want compensation for their data? So we have a total of 3 to 4 questions from the floor, and maybe you can choose one to answer, starting from President Choi.
Yes, in relation to data fragmentation, let me answer that question. Well, it depends on whether the data is in the public sphere, whether it's public data or whether it's private data. It depends on that. So what I mentioned about data fragmentation includes both. So we can see that we had a lot of projects that were in the public sphere. And if it was sponsored by the government, then we had to issue reports after the project was concluded. So we have a lot of data that is included in the public arena. And at the same time, we have the data held by the ministries that were in charge of the project. So it is part of the public sector, but you have to know who has hold of the data. And then there could be structured data and non-structured data. There could be photos, there could be videos, there's data in the Word file or Excel file. So there is different formats, and we have data in the public arena and private arena. So even within NGOs, we can see that there are people who are in charge of humanitarian activities, and also even within domestic activities, people are in charge of different fields. So there has to be also the de-identification of the data. And so we have to capture and collect the data, of all of the data that we have. For example, there could be data from the project that we carried out in Suez, for example. And then there could be data that were included in some of the research done in the academia. So there's a lot of different data that are scattered around. And there's data, for example, in the academia research. So they're all scattered around. It's not difficult to collect them, but we have to know who has the ownership of the data. And also we have to think about whether this is part of the public data, and at the same time, we have to think about whether the individual NGOs, well, we do have the technological solutions to do that, but I think what we need at this point is the policy support and the mindset. And if so, then I think we will be able to move towards solving this issue of data fragmentation. And if so, then we can make our work more efficient and better utilize AI. Chairperson O. Yes, well, I think I mentioned this before, but when it comes to AI or digital technology utilization, I think that they can be applied to making the work of NGOs more efficient. But of course, that's good. But that's not different from the companies, the private sector, because the large or the mid-size NGOs, there's no different from companies. And so they have to have greater productivity. So compared to the input, there has to be greater output, and the NGOs also have to make that effort to enhance their productivity. And so AI and digital technology can be applied to enhance productivity of the NGO. So I agree with that approach 100%, but I don't think that's the main point of what we're talking about. What the private sector is doing, of course, NGOs can mimic that as well, but that's not what's most important here. That's an issue of modality. The NGOs, the core of what the NGOs are doing are helping the vulnerable or assisting the vulnerable in our society to ensure that the vulnerable can live lives that ensure human dignity. So I think that that kind of approach that ensures the human rights of people, sometimes that is at a clash with AI. For example, the vulnerable group in our society, well, sometimes they are at a challenging situation, but sometimes the privacy issue is a stumbling block to help the vulnerable. So we have to think about these relevant issues.
Yes, Secretary General Kim. Well, for NGOs, whether it be the management side or the project side on site, we do have accumulated expertise. And these expertise are very important. But who owns these expertise? I ask this question to our employees very often. I do believe that NGOs, when they accumulate expertise, the ownership of this expertise is with the sponsors and the citizens. And so this is very different from companies. So I don't believe that we need to move in the same way as companies, whether it be our sponsors or the citizens. if they actually have a social challenge they want to solve with our expertise, then that is something that we need to support. That is my view and the view of Good Neighbors. So all of the expertise and data that has been accumulated through our management and our projects, we need to be able to share that. And so we first need to have an understanding amongst the NGOs that we should be sharing this back with the society. But as the other two gentlemen has mentioned, we need to make sure that we protect personal information in that process through strict management. Thank you very much. So we only have about 25 minutes left. And so I think it would be great to continue to open the floor for further questions. So that is why I've decided to combine the last two questions together. Well, I think some of these topics have already been discussed already, but the next question is the impact on SDGs, for example, the limitations in achieving SDGs and also the benefits to achieving SDGs. And what about the recognition of the staff at the NGOs towards these technologies? Some people may reject these technologies. Some people may fully support these technologies. And so could you share with us what you believe is to be the understanding of the staff concerning these technologies? Maybe we can go in the opposite order, starting with Secretary General Kim, just to catch you off guard. I think I have already started to answer these questions during the previous round. Well, for the staff at Good Neighbors, there are some examples that we can take a look at. For example, some of the work that they do is repetitive and redundant. And so, as I mentioned before, during the last 18 months or so, we analyzed all of the work that our staff conducts, and we have categorized the work that they have done. Not only their work process, but all of the information produced through the work has also been categorized. And so, through this 18-month process, we have been able to make automatic, through AI, the repetitive work that the staff was doing. So they don't do repetitive work anymore. So for example, in the past, we needed to have 20 people conduct repetitive work, but now AI is able to do that. And so the staff on their way out, going home, would instruct the AI to do the repetitive work. And the 20 people who used to do this work, what are they doing now? For Good Neighbors, we have an emphasis on creating jobs. And we believe that creating jobs within Good Neighbors is one of our social responsibilities. And so what we need to do now is to utilize the staff for strategic work to enhance international cooperation and to enhance our projects on site. That would mean that the job satisfaction of our employees became higher. And so I hope that the NGOs would become more open and proactive in applying new technologies so that the job satisfaction of the employees would be boosted, and also to reallocate employees to more strategic work so that we can continue to further advance our NGOs. And for the development NGOs, in order to operate the NGOs, one of the important composition of our NGOs is to win the trust of our donors. The donors receive project reports, and they also need to receive information on the changes of the children that they are sponsoring. So there is a big gap between the sponsoring countries and the recipient countries. And so we need to make sure that there is trust between the two sides by having accurate information. Sometimes the information that we would receive from the recipient countries would not be accurate, and sponsors were concerned about this type of information. And so by introducing AI, we were able to add accuracy and therefore win the trust of our sponsors. So the trust between the sponsors and the NGOs and the individual sponsors and the benefiting recipient countries is becoming stronger through the introduction of AI. And on site, many different technologies can be introduced. For example, in the area of health, it is very difficult to have a doctor on site at the developing country to diagnose and prescribe to the children. But now with facial recognition systems, we are now able to check the nutritional state and the health state of individual children. And so for areas that lack proper health infrastructures, we are able to utilize AI-based facial recognition systems. This has yet to be introduced to our sites, but we have introduced smart care for the farm animals. And this is something that we have introduced in Korea, but will also be introduced in developing countries. So there will be a smart biosensor inside the mouth of these animals, and these chips will help us have real-time monitoring of livestock. And based on this, we can respond to any possible diseases. This could enhance the value of livestock and also the productivity. So we are in the pilot test stage. There is one more example that I would like to utilize. Insect smart farms are what we are also looking into. Of course, it's very difficult to think of insects as alternative food, but we do believe that insects could be a source of great nutrition for livestock. And so we are trying to introduce smartphone technologies for insect farms to monitor the temperature and humidity, to optimize the insect farm conditions. So from the project side, we are going through trial and error, but as time passes by, we do believe that we can enhance productivity. What I would like to mention here is that on the project site, there is one big rule about introducing AI. When we introduce AI, it is to boost the productivity and efficiency of the projects, but we are also mindful of the fact that NGOs create jobs in developing countries. But with the introduction of AI technologies, one important role of NGOs, which is job creation, may be hindered through AI. So we will try to think about introducing AI from this perspective with a very long-term perspective so that we can be aligned with the industrial development of that specific country. Let's go to Chairman Oh.
Yes, well, I would like to talk a little bit about the SDGs. We are here at the forum, GEEF, and this was first launched 8 years ago. I was part of the organization committee back then. And at first, there was a view that we should call this the Global SDG Forum, but we decided to call it the Global Empowerment. And what's the other E? Is it engagement? Yes. We decided to call it the GEEF. So back then, SDG accomplishment was important. It's still very important. We're at the year 2025. That is the goal for all countries that was established in UN. We have 5 years to go until 2030. And at the university level, I teach students about the Sustainable Development Goals. And I tell students to tell me within 10 words the reason why the SDGs were developed. And the students tell me SDG has been established to respond to climate change and inequalities, to resolve these issues. So AI and digital technology, of course, can help us resolve climate change because science is very important to tackling the issue of climate change. The reason, the cause, and the trends can be analyzed utilizing AI technology as well as big data. There can be many different technologies that can be applied to more effectively tackle the issue of climate change. But another important raison d'etre for SDG would be resolving the issue of inequality. And this is a little bit more complex, as I mentioned before. Inequality. Well, there's a survey conducted by WEF, and we ask people, digital transformation, robotics, if these technologies are further spread, do you think that inequality will be resolved, or do you think that inequality will worsen? And if you look at what people have replied, you can see that the response are mixed. There are some people who believe that these technologies will worsen inequality. I talked about the robot vacuum cleaners, but soon we might see the humanoids within our households that takes care of our house chores, doing our cleaning, washing the dishes. This will, people say, take place in about a decade. It's the same thing as we've seen the televisions be adopted in our households. We will soon see the robots playing a role in our households. Do you think that such technology advancement will worsen inequality or ease inequality? In the short term, it will worsen inequality because robots will not just be sold at 5,000 won, because robot vacuum cleaners cost more than 1 million won. And televisions back in 1962, the penetration rate was only 1%. So robots, probably the penetration rate will be less than that. From the perspective of NGOs and from the perspective of accomplishing the SDGs, we have to think about how we can reduce the inequalities. Well, if you say that in 3 decades, everyone will have robots in their households, well, that's something that the sociologists will say. But right now, as NGOs, whose purpose of existence is to help and assist those, support the vulnerable in our society, we really have to think about what we have to do from that perspective. Yes, thank you very much. So you talked about many different issues, and you say that it will take time to have insects be utilized as an alternative food source. And the Snow Train, the movie, came to mind because there were different classes and different sections of the train that you can ride depending on your class. So you talked about the humanoids. Well, when humanoids are introduced, what will happen to social inequality? Well, Secretary General Kim and Chairperson Oh, I think that there's a common thread in what you've said. Let's now give the mic to President Che. Yes, well, AI and digital technology, well, these are combinations of the different technologies that have been advanced to this point. And they can be used for solving the climate issue. There can be climate technologies, there can be ag techs, and there can be also healthcare technologies. There are various types of technologies, and I've been out in the field, and I have been seeing the different digital technologies that have been developed, and I have been seeing the potential, at the same time, the limitations of these digital technologies. For example, in Africa, south of the border, sub-Saharan Africa, where there's a lot of drought, we can see that you really have to dig more than 100 meters in order to be able to think of alternative sources of energy. And also, we talked about smart farms, but that can be another way of utilizing technology. Well, I have seen how the smart farm technology are being applied in these regions. And also we're experiencing climate crisis, but we could see that how in countries where there's food shortages, exacerbated by the current conditions, how biotechnology can change the seeds of the crops that they can plant and how that can help improve their food situations. And these are some of the efforts that are ongoing to solve the challenges related to our SDGs. So after the pandemic, we have become accustomed to remote learning in advanced countries. We will become more accustomed to remote learning and utilizing such technology as years go by. And also with the children in Suez, our staff at our center have been carrying out a pilot project to see if distant learning can work. And we have been looking at some of the pros and cons of this kind of approach. So the infrastructure that we are utilizing, well, how can we adopt this to other countries such as Suez? And also, how can we do more? Up till now, we have been focusing on the initial industries, for example, agriculture, for example, improving their agricultural skills, or, for example, helping them train on better maintaining or the maintenance of automobiles or the motorcycles that they use. But because we see that, we are seeing that digital skills are becoming increasingly relevant for these people as well. What we're looking at is how we can have them benefit from the digital technology, how we can create jobs from where they are, and how we can help them benefit from these digital technology. But of course, the core of digital technology is connectivity, so there has to be network infrastructure. So smart farms, they're all great, but you have to have network infrastructure in order to enable all of that. And as you know, within Korea, we can carry out these pilots and test beds, but within the Suez environment, sometimes it is difficult to carry out these test beds and pilots. And Starlink, well, I understand that through Starlink, such connectivity is being enabled. And I've been to some of the WFP test beds in various areas. The test beds looked great, but controlling the networks remotely, there was the cost issue. So how are we going to manage the cost? That was another challenge that we were faced with. And we're talking about introducing 6G at the end of this year here in Korea. Then how can we utilize a private network that we had utilized in the past? Well, this is a cost-effective infrastructure that can be implemented. So we thought about utilizing this in the areas that we work in. But for that, we need to be able to have volunteers. I understand there are a lot of people in the IT sector who actually are interested in volunteerism. So we are thinking about the various options, how we can utilize some of the infrastructure that are no longer used in Korea and have the IT experts engage in volunteer work, take them along with the infrastructure, apply them in some of the other regions around the world that have need for digital technology implementation. So we're thinking about what we can do further to have people better benefit from these advanced digital technologies. Because digital transformation is so relevant to everyone globally. So we have to ensure that they have the communication skills. It doesn't have to be the most advanced level, but they should be able to receive the training for utilizing PC. And in this era of AI, I think that if so, then they would be able to have at least basic access to the benefits of the digital technology of this age. So we have to think about what we can do. But in order to ensure that, I think that education is our utmost priority. So our organization, we cannot do this immediately. So what we're doing is we have a 3-year plan, and this is a BAA plan, Business AI Agent Plan. And this is the next stage for digital transformation. So how can we utilize the efficiency enhancement function of AI? Of course, we have to think about the prejudice of data. Of course, it's good to be able to utilize data for training AI, but at the same time, we have to be wary of the prejudice, for example, gender, color, and all of these issues that can lead to prejudice because we have these prejudice embedded in the data that we might use for training. So we are conscious of that as we prepare for the data for these efforts.
Having listened to all three gentlemen, we have seen that time flew by, and so we only have 3 minutes left, so maybe just a short question. We are pressed for time. We only have 3 minutes, actually 2 now, so could you keep your question short, please? Please use the microphone for interpretation. Well, Secretary General Cho, based on AI, since you are leading Korean NGOs, so at OCHA or UNHCR, they have plans to review all of their member organizations. So do you actually have any plans to set up a way to monitor your member NGOs? For good neighbors, within your overhead expenditure, when you streamline your administrative costs using AI, of course, it's probably different case by case. What are some of the expense saving effects? So we only have a minute left, so maybe Secretary General, you can speak for about 30 seconds, and then I can close with my statement. Well, it took a lot of talent and time to categorize all of the work that we do. And developing solutions, it actually, for example, would cost 12 million won per robot. And how many robots do you need would be actually the cost. And so it's very difficult to exactly talk about the cost itself because each organization is different. Well, related to data, we do have some data that we have accumulated, but it's the task that we have at hand to accumulate more data. This brings us to the end of the Q&A session, and we are out of time, so let me now wrap up this session. Well, is there anything else that you would like to mention on the part of the panel? We have invited 3 gentlemen on stage as our panel, and I think we heard 3 perspectives. Secretary General talked about Kim from the management perspective, gave us great insights. And Chairman Oh talked about the global side and the value side. So what are some things that we tend to miss out on? And President Choi focused on his expertise of technology. And so we have heard 3 different perspectives, but 3 are absolutely necessary to all of us. There's a few keywords that I jotted down for Chairman Oh: SDG and inequality. For Secretary General Kim, by applying AI, there is a boost in productivity as well as higher trust between the donors and the recipient countries. I think that was the key word for President Choi. Data is the key word for this era. And having listened to this conversation, my conclusion is break. Because Chairman Oh talked about how we are at a very important juncture. The world has the government sector and the profit-making sector, and these 2 sectors are trying to maximize productivity and efficiency by using technology. But I think the role of a break can be conducted by our sector because the world is moving too fast. So rather than all pressing on the accelerator at the same time, we also need to press on the brake, and the sector that can play the role of a brake is the NGO, the CSO sector. And so that is definitely the role that we need to play in this society. In this world where everyone is chasing after productivity, we need to keep our eyes focused on our values and those that we need to provide a helping hand to. And so we have to think about how we can play the role of a brake in this AI world. Thank you very much for joining us across the long session. This brings us to the end of session 11. Thank you very much.
Thank you, speakers, for those illuminating perspectives on AI's transformative potential in the nonprofit space. We'll now take a short break before our next session at 1 p.m. Thank you.